Well, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and for today's live stream, we're going to be covering the latest updates to the Lumetri Color Panel and color workflows in Premiere Pro CC 2019. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about here, again, this is all about new features inside of the Lumetri Color Panel for Premiere Pro CC 2019. And the first thing that we've done, and I'm going to take these sort of top to bottom as we've made changes inside the various modules of Lumetri Color. So the first actually begins right at the top here. And you may have noticed two new things. Now, one of them was added in April of 2018. The other was just added in October. The first is this global, or I should say, effects bypass button, which was added. This was something that we didn't have prior to this past April's release. And also this little drop-down menu here, which is going to allow you to add Lumetri Layers. That's right. So now you have the ability, just like in Photoshop, to stack multiple layers of different types of grades on your footage inside of Premiere Pro without ever having to leave the Lumetri Color Panel interface. Now, this is something, of course, that you could have done previously inside of the Effects Controls panel. The issue there was that that wasn't really the intention there. Yes, you could stack multiple Lumetri Color effects in here, but as you can see, if you needed to make modifications, it involved a lot of scrolling around, and honestly, the program at the time wasn't really optimized to play back multiple levels of Lumetri when stacked in that kind of way. But now with layers, it is. You're going to find the performance is better, and just the ability to work between them is so much easier. So in this first layer here, the first thing I'm going to do is rename this, because something that we'll typically do, and again, this is just to give you an idea of how you can think about using layers when you're grading. We're going to call this a little bit of a pre-grade, all right? And I'll name this pre-grade. And I'm going to twirl down basic corrections. And when I do that, what you'll see is that there's actually an input LUT that has been applied to this footage. Now, again, a lot of the content that you shoot today, especially if you're shooting on like the Sonys, you can see here, this is using like an S-Log3. You probably want to shoot flat, which is what you see here on this content, and then add that input LUT to kind of get your colors to that starting point before you begin your actual grades. Let's go ahead and take the bypass off here. And this is showing you what that flattened footage looks like with that input LUT placed back on top of it, all right? So on this pre-grade layer, this is where we might just sort of, again, add the input LUT and then maybe do a couple of subtle tweaks, subtle things, just to kind of equalize or balance out the colors a bit before we start getting into something a little bit more creative. Maybe we'll have different layers that contain different looks altogether. Maybe we'll have one that's very cinematic. Maybe we'll have one that's more broadcast safe. You get the idea. So on this pre-grade layer here, just going to make a couple of additional tweaks. Maybe we'll just drop the contrast ever so slightly. Our highlights look good. I'm actually going to pump those up just a little bit. Maybe adjust the black level here. And I think that looks pretty good for this pre-grade. And again, we can use the effects bypass. There's before our flat footage. There it is with this little pre-grade added. Okay, so now this is where now on the second layer, I might want to do something a little bit different. Again, using some of those creative LUTs, maybe just use additional controls and basic corrections. So let's come down here and choose Add Lumetri Color Effect. When you do that, it's going to simply name it Lumetri Color. So for this, let's go ahead and rename it. And we'll call this Creative Look C for color, okay? And maybe we'll do another one for black and white in a moment. All right, so Creative Look C. Now, again, we can continue now to make additional changes. So we can cool this off or warm it up. Maybe that's what we'll do. We'll actually start by cooling it a bit. All right, watching our scopes very carefully here. Once again, maybe we'll just adjust the saturation ever so slightly. But now we want to get a bit more creative. So we can go into the creative panel here and start flipping through all the various LUTs. And maybe I want to add something like a film stock emulation, or perhaps go into some of our more creative type LUTs. You can see I'm kind of clicking through them here. Something that's just going to give this a little bit more punch, a little bit more character. Actually, that Gold Rush one looks kind of cool. Go ahead and apply that. All right, you can kind of see what that looks like. Again, affect our intensity here. Maybe give this a little bit of a faded film aesthetic. All right, maybe add a little bit more vibrance on this. And remember, of course, that you still have the ability to go back to the basic controls on this particular layer, and maybe we'll just do a little bit of a contrast drop here again, just because we're kind of hitting the edge there. Play this back, kind of take a look at what this looks like here, and that looks pretty awesome, okay? Now remember, of course, that we have these all stacked. So, of course, I could go back and I could disable this layer, and there's our layer with just the input LUT applied. Or maybe we want to see, well, what does this look like without the input LUT, but keep the creative look on? Let's go to the pre-grade layer and turn that off. That gives you the idea. Of course, it's still very flat and sort of creamy looking because it doesn't have that S-log layer, which it really requires. But you get the idea. So now we can really start manipulating and creating new looks and have all of those easily stackable and easily bypassable. I don't even know if that's a word. You can bypass them easily right here in Lumetri. Let's do a third one here, and we'll call this one, we'll rename it, and we'll call this BW Creative. Okay, so maybe we want to do like a black and white look on this. Now, before we even get started here, obviously, I don't want to grade this over top of the that sort of very colorful look that we just did. So I'm going to turn that off and go back to that default pre-grade state. Come down to B&W Creative. Now, there's lots of different ways that we could do this. Again, we could really just start by desaturating the whole thing. Maybe we'll desaturate it a little and lower the contrast here, but go back into Creative and maybe choose some of those black and white film stock LUTs. We've got lots of really cool ones in here that, really kind of just add a very nice, beautiful kind of film-like aesthetic to it. I actually really like this one. This is the Kodak 5218. Maybe we'll come in here and for a little bit more drama, add a little slight vignette to this, okay? And we can continue to play around as we see fit. Maybe even add just a little bit of sharpening to this, all right? Something like that, okay? Once again, play this back, just like that. Looks pretty cool. All right, and maybe if we were sort of monitoring this for broadcast output, we could also use some of our curves or other things just to ensure that this is going to be broadcast safe. The idea being now, of course, that we have all three of these layers right here, which we can quickly and easily access and bypass or enable as we see fit. Additionally, you may remember, of course, that we have HSL secondaries, right? So this is one of the features that allows us to target a specific color range, modify or refine that color range by changing it to a new color or something like that. And of course, you can only create one secondary layer inside of Lumetri. Well, now, because of layers, you can have multiple layers with multiple secondary color corrections. Easy to turn on and off. And don't forget, of course, you can still use all of the various masking controls. So you can create an elliptical mask, you can create a polygon mask or your own freeform mask, and of course track those as well and apply those grades moving over time on separate layers inside of Lumetri. Super powerful, super cool. Now, a question that a lot of people have asked me since I started showing this, what if we want to reorder these layers? They are, in fact, in the order, they are stacked and are affected in the order that you see them, with pre-grade first, then the color one, which is currently defeated, and then the black and white one. If you want to reorder them, currently in this version, there's no way to do that here. That is the one exception to where you have to go back to the effects controls panel. And if I twirl all of these up, all right, let's just say we wanted, for whatever reason, the black and white look to be before the color look, right? Just for whatever reason. Go ahead and move that in the stack. You can see that here. We've got our pre-grade black and white and color now. And if we go back to Lumetri over here, you can see that the position has also been changed, okay? So that's really the only time that you would need to go back to the effects controls outside of keyframing color changes, of course. Now, again, when we're talking about grading color timing, it's not just about setting it and forgetting it. A lot of times you are making particular changes over time. So the keyframing still happens on the effects side, but that general getting the look set for you can happen now in those stackable layers inside of Lumetri Color. Now, moving along here, one other additional thing that we're going to find that I don't always get to talk about is something based around color management. And if you go up to the Premiere Pro Preferences under General, you will now see a checkbox here to enable display color management. Requires GPU acceleration. Now, before we get to this, what does that mean? That means that you must be enabled with either Metal, if you're on the Mac, Mac OS, OpenCL, Mac or PC, or NVIDIA CUDA, Mac or PC, to leverage display color management. And what that effectively does is it detects the type of display that you're working on and then adjust the screen so what you're seeing in the scopes is exactly what you're seeing in the program monitor. So if I were to go ahead and take this off, I'm going to disable, uncheck this box, you'll see the scope won't change, but you're going to see somewhat dramatically that the visual right here will change. Here we go. Let's click OK on that. And you can see right away, just the whole contrast of this changed dramatically, okay? So this is a really nice new addition here, simply to be able to enable display color management. Let's go ahead and turn that back on, which I'm now leaving on by default. Click OK. And now you can see no change in the scopes. Scopes are always showing you what you needed to know. It was more about what you were seeing inside the program monitor here. So very cool to have that. Now, with regard to enabling GPU acceleration, for those of you maybe new to Premiere, unfamiliar of where do I set that, easiest way is to go up to File, Project Settings, General. And here in Project Settings General, this is where you can now choose the various GPU acceleration methods that you have available to you. You also have now selectable hardware encoding options right inside File Export Media in Premiere Pro as well. And I'm just going to show you that real quickly since we're talking about GPU, and this is all related to color. If we go up to File, Export Media, and if we were to go out to something like one of our common web formats, say for YouTube, for instance, incidentally, you'll also notice we've once again retooled the presets inside of the export settings dialog here. You'll now see 1080 and 4K presets, even for Facebook, among others. But if you go inside the video tab here and scroll down, you will now see you have the option for hardware encoding or software encoding right here. Now, why that's cool is that if you choose export, and I've talked about this many times, so the export button here enables a modal dialog type of export, meaning that you're going to stay in this view and it's using all of your system's resources. You can't really do anything else. You might be able to go to, mail or something if you want to check email, but it's using all of your system's resources. The idea there being that it's going to export as quickly as possible. Previously, however, the default for that was a software-based encode. And now you have options. You can either choose the hardware-based encode based on the settings that you have in your sequence, or you could default to the older method of using a software-based encode. Naturally, if you click on Q, which sends it to Adobe Media Encoder in the background, you have all of those options available to you inside the standalone media encoder. And you can choose software or the various GPU acceleration options. All right. So really cool stuff there. The effects bypass, the Lumetri layers. Oh, and one more thing, just because I talked about this the other day, and this is one of those hidden things. Now, this is not new to 2019, but we also have a global effects mute. Sometimes when you're grading or just working in compositing, VFX, whatever it is that you're doing, you've got a lot of effects going. Sometimes you just want to watch everything back, but maybe it's one of those situations where you're cutting on your laptop and you really want to see how it looks, but you don't want to watch it at quarter res or 1/8 res or 1/16 if you're working especially in 4 or 6K. And to get better playback, of course, if we just turned off all the effects, that's going to make a difference, right? So you actually have a global effects mute button right here, which will just turn everything off. Now, if you don't see that, you won't see that there by default. That can be found inside the button editor. So if you click on the button editor, this is where you'll find it. You can simply click and drag it down into the button panel here and add that global effects mute button. It's just a really nice addition to have, again, especially if you're just kind of doing a quick scrub through of things and just want to watch, cuts and edits. Again, you're not concerned about the grade and all the effects and other elements, just wanting to kind of see how the story is flowing. Turn off the effects momentarily, go into full screen mode, go into full fractional playback mode, and then you can turn them back on after the fact. So now we're going to segue into probably what is the coolest new addition in this release of Premiere Pro, which is something that we're calling Selective Color. And I showed this at Adobe Max. I've shown this a couple of times here on the stream. And here what we've done is we have removed the previous hue saturation wheel that many of you will have known from the previous version of Premiere, which existed under this curves section here. We still have the same RGB curves, but we took out that hue saturation wheel, and that has now been replaced by 5 new discrete curves, which many of you will know from a lot of your popular grading applications. Hue versus sat, hue versus hue, hue versus luma, luma versus sat, and sat versus sat. And the idea here is that we didn't simply want to give you the curves that you already know from these other apps. Yes, we wanted to do that. But more importantly, we really wanted to kind of reimagine how you can use these. And for new new users or people that are new to grading and color correction in general, we wanted to really be able to guide you to understand how these curves work, to really entice you to want to learn more about grading. And for the pros out there, it's going to feel familiar. It's going to work in a very intuitive sort of way. But we've also given you a couple little of extras there. And you're going to find across all of these new features and really the apps in general across Creative Cloud, a lot of work has been done on that UX, user experience design, just making that experience of working with these new curves that much more intuitive, that much more flexible, and just ultimately that much better. So the first thing I want to do, we're going to focus on using this hue versus sat curve here. And in this particular shot, again, captured for us by Silver Salts in Iceland, what I simply wanted to do was warm up his skin tones, saturate them a bit more, and then saturate the blues in the sky. So to do that, I'm going to start by taking the familiar Adobe eyedropper up here and simply click on his face. And when I do that, I'm presented with 3 control points. Now I can add additional ones. I can spread these out, do whatever I want to. But just like this, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to actually hold down my Shift key, which will constrain that center control point, meaning that I won't be able to move to the left or right. It's going to stay on that exact hue. And now when I click on this, and as I start to move up, you'll see that we're beginning to saturate the skin tones. And as I move down, we are desaturating the skin tones. Now, when I talk about reimagining this, take a look at the actual vertical line that we're looking at here. You can see that it's showing that as we go up, it's more in those orange warm tones. And as we go down, it's desaturated into those lighter white tones. So it's actually showing you, guiding you, explaining to you what's happening as you're using this color curve. Super cool. Again, really effective. Let's do the same thing for the sky. I'm going to click in the blue here. All right, it gives us those control points. Once again, I'll constrain the motion. Same thing. If I want to go more blue, saturate the blues, I can see it. Ah, that's what that does, okay? Or desaturate them like that, okay? Really simple, really effective. Absolutely cool. These are the kinds of things where, previously I had a lot of fear using curves and Resolve and elsewhere because I didn't get it. And part of why I didn't get it is because when you look at the curve like down here, when you're working with those oranges, skin tones, right? You always had points along the edges here that kind of got in the way and you were fighting with the sides. You are if you're using it today. Well, this is one of those little extras that we've given you inside of the selective color grading curves. You will notice here that we have this little slider, which means that regardless, see, this is what you'd be working on, right? Typically something like this. And this is what always, it frightened me. I mean, it really did. It made me not want to use it because I didn't quite I got it, but I never felt comfortable. So now you can simply drag the colors, the hues that you're working on, centered into view wherever you want, very easily, very simply, very quickly, okay? So a little bit of hue versus sat, all right? Now, I'm just gonna, let me see, I'll switch back to this example here. This is another cool one again. So this is another clip again, shot in Africa from Silver Salts. And in this particular shot, we were thinking, well, it might sort of be cool to test hue versus hue. Again, adjusting the hue of a particular selected hue value. Maybe to take these girls' dresses in the foreground, which are kind of an orange color, and make them all the same sort of magenta that you see along the wall there. So once again, I'm going to take the familiar eyedropper here for hue versus hue. I'm going to select a point on the dress to get that orange hue. Now this is where it really starts to get cool again because here, let me drag these up so I can kind of be side by side with this. Awesome. So now when I click on that center control point, now it's showing me the hue that I'll be moving to. So if I go south of the line, you can see I'm moving towards, again, oranges, yellows, greens. We don't want that. We want that sort of same magenta pink color that we see. So we're simply going to move up here till we get it about right. That looks pretty good. We might move over a little bit more. Yeah, I think I got it right there. Okay, nice. They're all now the same sort of uniformed magenta, right? Wind back. And of course, you can enable or disable these modules as you're playing back. This leverages Premiere Pro's uninterrupted playback feature. Been in there for quite some time. But this is, again, talking about some of the optimizations in Lumetri. You can really see just how nice and fluid the playback is here and just how seamless and wonderful it really looks. All right, super cool. Hue versus hue. something that I previously honestly didn't get. I'm going to show you one more example of that because I love the way this one looks in particular. So this is another one shot in New York, and we've got this night sky, and thought, well, wouldn't it be kind of cool if we could kind of alter the night sky to create a sort of gradient, again, kind of turning this lighter blue as she segues into darker blue into sort of a more pinkish color. So again, I'll take the eyedropper, click into the sky. Once again, I'm going to hold down, constrain that center point, and let's just turn this slightly more purple pinkish, something like this. Okay, we can go like extreme, something like that if we want. Yeah, why not? Let's take a look at that. All right. And look at what this did. I love this. It's actually created this natural gradient in the sky here. I mean, so cool. And we could take this totally extreme. We could make it red, right? Segueing into the blue, whatever we want. You know, your mileage may vary in how good it actually looks. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, yeah. We're getting a little grain, a little noise on this now. This is also a transcoded version of this clip. So I imagine if we're working on the original here, it would look even better. But you get the idea, okay? And this is probably a good example of where we might use something like that. SAT versus SAT or LUMA versus SAT, just to adjust the saturation of a particular luminance value or saturation value, okay? Now, speaking of hue versus LUMA, right? So in this particular shot, I kind of love what we did here, but there wasn't really enough drama for me in the sky. I wanted to darken those blues, right? As opposed to brighten them. So for that, we're going to use the hue versus LUMA curve. Now, this was, again, one of those things that it always eluded me how to use these previously. But now it makes so much sense. So, okay, I want to add drama. I want to darken the blues. So you're thinking like, well, do I want to saturate them? No, that's just going to make it the same color of blue, but just more of it until the footage breaks down. No. I need to adjust the luminance. So take the eyedropper, click into the blue, gives me my control points, okay? And now, just as with before, and I love this, when I click on this, now what is it showing me? Oh, by the way, this is what it looks like when you're unconstrained. You see, I can move left or right here. All right. If I simply hold down Shift, I can't go left or right, only up or down. But now what you can see is as I go up, it's showing me, right, that we're brightening the blue. And I don't want that, right? I don't want to make the blue whiter, brighter. And as you can see, this is transcoded, so it's kind of breaking down here. I don't want that. I want to darken that blue, right? More drama, something like this. And let's go scoot down here so you can see, right, towards black. You can actually see it's guiding you. I love this. I mean, this is so well done. Please, someone I'm sure is saying, you work there. Of course you love it. Yes, I do, but I couldn't, I was too, not even fear, I couldn't do this before because I just didn't get how these curves really worked. And these have really taught me how they work. And they perform nicely. So it really gives you a lot of flexibility when working with this, okay? So there's our before, right? Pretty, but not as much drama. And there's the after. I notice, of course, that it affects the reflection in the water as well, okay? Hue versus LUMA. So again, lots of different ways that we could use that. Here's another one here, another hue versus LUMA example. Here's another one as well. So what have we got in this one? Oh yeah, so we're just kind of adjusting the luminance of the sky there. This is a very grainy sort of night shot, but just building on a little bit more of that drama. Now, I want to quickly cut to a couple of these. These start to get a little harder, and again, you need to be a little bit more of a correction and grading expert to leverage these properly. But conceptually, you'll get the idea. So here's the original clip as it looked, okay? Sky, we've got our, the whites are kind of just below clipping here. Again, probably fixed before it was transcoded. So you can see it's not above 255, but it's somewhat flatlined there, kind of peaked out, probably not in the original raw clip. But we wanted to add, again, adjust the saturation of that brightness of the luminance. There is color there. I don't know if it's coming through on the stream, of course, but it is kind of a warm morning light, all right? Sunrise morning light. So in this case, let's go ahead and turn on LUMA versus SAT. And you can see now we've just enhanced the saturation of the brightness of that yellow sky, of that yellow sun, all right? And again, we can even move this over a little bit more. You can see if we take this down, kind of doing the opposite here, right? Just like that, okay? Got to watch it. You got to really pay attention to those scopes there. Right, not exactly within legal limits right here, but you get the idea, okay? Here's another one that kind of showcases that a little bit more nicely as well. This one here. So here is the original shot. It's a beautiful shot, but, and we've got that sort of bright blue, but it was bright. I mean, the sun was just very bright. So we needed to saturate the brightness of the blues in the sky. Luma versus sat, there it is, right? Changes the whole look of the clip. Before, after. Before, after. All right? Really cool. Really, really awesome. Okay. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you here, I'm just going to skip ahead. This one, and this is really for people who really understand these curves. I'm quoting here because I'm still figuring out really where I would use this, but you can kind of get the idea. So again, sat versus sat. How this has been explained to me is that this is particularly useful if you're, now remember that Premiere also has a new limiter effect, and it's actually probably worth pointing out just to show it to you here. Hold on, I'm going to call it up. I'm going to stick it on this clip as well. You can't see me typing in the effects panel here, but it's fine. Okay. So we have a new video limiter. It's been replaced. There's the legacy one is still in there. This new video limiter, the main thing here is that you'll now see a bunch of newer, more modern standards, right? Conforming to, everything from 100 IRE all the way up to 109. This one is, as has been mentioned to me and told to me, but also I can verify myself, this is legit for broadcast. You can also implement this limiter on export to keep those colors broadcast safe. But sat versus sat is one more area where you can use this curve to, again, control saturation before your final output. So you can see here as I kind of increase the curve here, how we're really affecting that sort of saturation point there. This one, again, probably needs a little bit more study. I can't really tell you more about it than that. You can read up on how sat versus sat is meant to be used. Of the 5 here, for me personally, this is the one that I've used the absolute least. But as I'm learning more and more about color, I anticipate, with the likes of some of my colorist geniuses out there like Simon Walker, I'll know more soon enough. So I'll be able to report back on that one. The other 4 here, really, though, they're going to take care of 90% of all the things you need, if not 100, depending upon what kind of work you're doing. So this is absolutely incredible. Selective color grading, 5 new curves. You saw it here: hue versus sat, adjust the saturation of a particular hue; hue versus hue; hue versus luma; luma versus sat; and sat versus sat. All right, really psyched to have these, of course, in this latest version. All right, and the very last thing that I'm going to show you here, which, as mentioned, is not new for 2019, but was only released 7 months ago and is still an extremely awesome and powerful feature. And hold on, I'm just going to change my workspace as well. Oh, and I probably need to readjust it down here too. Hold on, just to make it look a little prettier for the stream. I get very weird with these workspaces if the camera doesn't look quite right. I don't mean it in a narcissistic way, just aesthetically. You get what I'm saying. Color wheels and match. So this was something that people have been asking for a very long time. When is Premiere going to have some kind of dedicated shot match control a la SpeedGrade? Well, this was something that we added again back in April, and it's absolutely wonderful. So here I have an example on the left, my reference shot. And on the right, I have my Adobe stock shot that I'm trying to match to the same look. And what color match will do is it'll automatically analyze the color and light from a reference video or even still image, and via Adobe Sensei, apply a look to your content to match as closely as possible. The coolest thing about this is that it's not a black box fix, meaning that it's fully editable after the fact. So with this particular clip in mind, if I simply come up to Color Wheels and Match and click Apply Match, Sensei does its thing, and there you go. And you can see here with our bypass, there's the before and there's the after. But as mentioned, it's still fully editable. So let's say that I wanted to sort of adjust the contrast of the highlights here ever so slightly. I can come over to this, all right, and make those adjustments. And you can see it's all fully editable. So we have complete control over this. And of course, this could then be saved out as a preset or a look or just a native preset inside of Premiere to apply to other like footage shot around the same time. Granted, with Color Match, you're probably applying these shot to shot, depending upon when things were captured, etc. But you've got all that flexibility available to you, again, in adjusting individual shadows, midtones, and highlights, as well as the contrast for each of those. Skipping ahead here, let me just go to another example using this same one. Oh, sorry. All right, so this clip here, again, very different light. Click on Apply Match. Turn off the bypass there. And, right away, we just get this really, really awesome look. Before, after. Before, after. And as someone who, I don't profess to be a colorist at all. I mean, so to try and match these two shots for me manually, it just would take an enormous amount of time. Now, is this going to nail it absolutely every single time? No, probably not. Probably not. You're probably going to have to give it a couple of tries here. But sometimes it will amaze you. Sometimes it'll all just do it, and it's just going to look incredible, just like that. Having said that, let's go to an example here where we're matching a still. So here's a still image just captured from one of the archives for Blade Runner 2049. Again, and here I've got a scene also shot by Silver Salts, a little aerial done on I think that was a Mavic Pro. Once again, apply match from a favorite still here, and it just gets it, right? So good. So good. All right, now what about something like this? Now let's go ahead and let's scrub to a different reference. Okay. So this is another shot. This is Iceland, but 2 different times, 2 different days, 2 different looks. So now we want to reference this and apply that look to this one. Let's go ahead and click on Apply Match. Now, we don't have faces in this particular one. If we did, this is where we would choose something like face detection. Click on Apply Match. Okay. And again, it kind of gives you the similar aesthetic. You can see if you look at the land here and sort of the mid-tone sky, very similar, but maybe we want to add a little bit more of the sort of bluish hues into the mid-tones ever so slightly. So this is where we could come in here and start to pull in some of those blues. Actually, that's not going to do it, right? See, this is what I'm talking about. I start to get confused here. Maybe a little bit more towards the greens. No, that's not it. Maybe I actually have to use the highlights here. So again, come over here. There we go. Now that's kind of getting me to where I want to be. And those just look sort of a bit more homogenized. Now, this is also where I could come in here and say, all right, maybe I want to adjust the hue of this sky right here. Come over here with my eyedropper, click inside of there. Here's our control points. And again, maybe move it either more towards the blue or maybe even a little bit more towards green, something like that. Okay. Remember, of course, that this is all real time. And now if I were cutting between these, I mean, this feels pretty comfortable. Here's the before and the after. Okay. And we could do even more, right? We could click into the sky here and do the same thing and readjust those hues. Okay. Maybe just add a little bit more blue right there. Okay. Really simply, really easily. So lots of really great new features for color in Premiere Pro CC 2019. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.